Welcome to this week's episode of Success in Women. I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
And today we got a tip first, Andrea, before we even tell them what we're going to talk about. What's our tip today?
Okay, so here's a really good tip that I have used. So I had bought years ago a beautiful bedroom set, all maple wood, and I had a nice sheen on it, semi-gloss. And I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the diffuser. I don't know. On my end table, a water stain. Oh, I was so heartbroken. I didn't know what to do. So, of course, what do? You Google. So I looked it up, and it said something about using a hair dryer. And I said, a hair dryer? Well, sure enough, I took the blow dryer, and I put it on the stain. It took a little while for it to heat up, but like a miracle, it started to fade and it was gone. That's my tip for today, ladies.
That's a good tip, because I know before I moved, I had a stain somewhere. Of course, I didn't know this a year and a half ago. I would have tried that on my furniture,
Yeah,
but
it works.
If I ever get my stuff out of storage, I might actually be able to try that.
Okay, good.
Anyway, today's topic we're going to talk about, because change is going on all around us at a rapid pace. And ladies, I'm not talking about the change of life. We know we're going through that. But
yeah, that happens quite quickly too.
Yes, it does. It really does. But we're going to talk about through the ages of, boy, when you think back, and Andrea and I were reminiscing about, growing up and, having rotary phones and not having voicemail and
Hooked up to the wall.
yes, hooked up. You couldn't
Go to another room and
No.
speak. There was one phone in the home.
That's true.
Hooked to a wall, and
No.
everybody heard your conversation.
Yes, I was going to say absolutely no privacy.
None.
But when you think about, the success women have had to go through in the times and the things that we've gone through.
Oh, yes.
Because I remember even, Andrew, when I started working at my other career many years ago, I didn't have a computer. And
No.
everything was manually done on paper.
By hand.
By hand. You had to remember everything. And what you didn't remember, of course, you had to write down in a file somewhere.
And keep it organized.
And keep it very organized.
File folders, tons of file folders, drawers of file folders. I worked in a bank for many years, and when I was first hired on as a teller, people would come in to make deposits, withdrawals. I had to go manually pull their card out. Every client had a card, and manually write the date, the amounts.
I remember
yes,
actually
and
when
then
I went to
putting
the
it-
bank, them doing that.
But what we would do is we'd pile it up on our side, the paperwork, and then after the bank was closed, then you took your pile and then you had to go and manually put it back in their file. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I've sat at a bank teller who's got a computer in front of her and takes twice as long as what I did back in the day. It took me 2 minutes to write it, give them their money, they're gone. Now it's this, they have to have a paper for this person and for that person. It takes so long. I'm going, what are you doing? I'm just depositing here. But I don't even know if the women today could deal with it.
And we're talking about the younger generation,
Yes.
because, it is different for people. They're growing up in an age of technology, which we manually had to do everything. I mean, that included, we didn't have a lot of choice in TV channels, but we were manually changing channels when we were younger.
We were our parents' remote controls.
Exactly. And even I remember doing a project for school, and that whether it's a project for work or project for school, whatever, I remember my family had not an encyclopedia, but a really good dictionary that had pictures on it and everything else. And what did I know? I mean, I'm doing my project and I got the scissors out and started cutting out things out of our family dictionary for my project.
Wow.
Which today you would just cut and paste from, the computer.
Everything on the computer. And the same thing, like if you wanted to do a project on, say, British Columbia or whatever, you'd have to find a book on British Columbia, or you'd have to get into the encyclopedia and do it all that way. And you'd have books all over the place on your table trying to do this. And nowadays, everything's right in the computer. The kids. I remember when my daughter. Okay, now she's 42, so she was in grade 8 at the time, and I remember the last project we did together. We did it by hand. She wrote everything out and, like you said, cut pictures and stuff. Do you know the teacher returned it and said it has to be done on the computer?
Wow.
I won't read this if it's done by hand.
Wow.
I thought, what is going on? What's happening? And that was it. That was probably the last time that kids would actually write it out and send it, hand it in.
You know, because we're older baby boomers and mature baby boomers, and you know, the thing is, we've gone through so much change. I mean, it's unbelievable. My mother's 91, and of course she's seen many changes, but we also, going from when we began our careers and the manual things that we had to do, but sometimes you can take the lessons in what we were doing manually and start embracing all the changes that's happening right now. And for a lot of us, it's not that easy. We have to get younger people to help us out, or Google, follow the instructions on a lot of different things that you can. And I will go to different sites when I start Googling because I'm not always sure, or they're not giving me quite enough information. But you know, when you talk about the progress and all the changes we did, I remember one of the times where I currently work, we get audited, and they wanted, like when you talked about the project and the teacher refused to look at it because it was done manually. Where I was working at the time, the audit team wanted everything manual, which meant they wanted files, and I had been running a paperless office when it was, I'll say, appropriate in the sense that computers could do, you know, everything that I was doing manually, but much faster. And that meant I didn't have piles and piles of papers for my assistant to file every week. And that was always the thing that got behind. And if you want to look for something, oh my God, you have to go through piles of paper. So I embraced the technology, even though I wasn't always comfortable with it, I embraced it. And so we were paperless, the first in our office to be paperless. And so back then we had what they call a stick. We could put our files on a stick, you put it into a computer, and everything came up. So if you want to look at the files, you could audit everything within minutes. And my assistant didn't tell me at the time, but they insisted it was going to be paper because the younger people wanted the paper so that they could touch, feel, flip, and look through.
Wow.
So because my assistant had given them a stick, they told my assistant, no, we're not going to look at this. We want it all on paper. She spent 3 hours photocopying the whole file because everything was on a stick. We didn't have a paper file.
Wow.
And so she had to start photocopying. So we had to get it all printed out.
So that was organized, like going backwards instead of forward.
Exactly.
And here you were willing to move forward, and they still weren't at that point yet.
Because part of being successful is always trying to take the initiative to start making the changes that make your job easier. But sometimes you have to convince people. And my assistant didn't tell me. She was naive. And so she thought, well, they're the people that are doing the auditing. I have to give them what they want. Only after the audit was over, and we were audited every year, so she told me what happened. And then we had all this paper that had to get shredded after they spent, and it also took the auditor much longer to be able to, I'll say, go through all that paper.
More government waste.
Yeah, so what happened was the very next year, I told my assistant, under no circumstance, you were giving them anything except the stick. Whatever files they wanted was fine,
That's right.
but you give it on a stick.
It's up to them to figure it out, not
Right.
you to accommodate them.
Well, what happened was because they were forced, because I told them, I said, no, we don't have paper and we're not going to print it out,
Good.
even for the audit. So, and you know, we also like to be green in the sense of conservation.
Right.
It was such a waste to have all this paper,
Sure.
not just her time in filing, but all that paper that we had to,
Yeah.
you know, have in, use up. And then files became bigger and bigger and bigger. We had filing cabinets coming out of our yin yang.
Exactly.
So when we went paperless,
Which change is trying to get rid of.
Yeah, and the thing is, change was happening, and that's how you become more successful, by embracing the change. We forced the auditor to actually look on the computer with our stick. They said they could not believe the amount of time it saved them, because absolutely everything they looked for had a heading, and it was easy. Whip, 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 whip. Everything was there.
Perfect.
Everything was in order.
Should have charged them for consulting fees or something.
Exactly. And after that, they made all the other advisors the following year put everything on a stick.
Oh,
and
I'm sure you were popular in the office.
Well, you know what? And the thing is, because a lot of consultants were not paperless, and so a lot of my colleagues were actually still doing paper, and so now they had to actually put things electronic for the auditors. What was interesting, though, is that gradually people now started to, and it takes a long time to get paperless.
Right.
But then when you start getting, you know, new files, you started putting everything automatically on the computer.
Right.
But it's that progress that we've been through.
Progress, exactly.
And
it takes a while in a lot of things, especially for the women of our age. Like my kids, my oldest daughter maybe didn't grow up with it so much, and she's learned. But my younger two, they're quite comfortable with the new technology, and if I have questions, I just go to them, and that's great. Now my grandson is already great.
Yes.
You know, can figure out he's on the iPad. He knows where to go, what to do. He's 4 years old.
Yeah,
they're growing up with it, and I mean it's like us when I think back when. If you remember the electric typewriter.
I remember having the manual, which I still own, because my father had bought it when I was in grade 9. I said to my dad I needed a typewriter, and he bought me one. And you had to bang, bang, bang on the typewriter.
Right, if you made a mistake.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then we got the electric one,
yes.
and it was like,
so much
wow,
easier.
You know, my father was like, oh, you girls are so spoiled. And then when the calculator came out, oh, I thought he was gonna flip a lid, you know, because your brain's gonna go to mush. And see that every generation thinks that the changes coming are not good for you, but some are good, some are bad. You know, it's like when we were working and I got pregnant, I could only take 3 months off. Nowadays, the women can take up to a year or more, and also the husbands can take maternity leave. And so that's a good change.
Yeah.
And
but
they're not worried about their jobs, because some pregnant women had lost their jobs in our generation.
Right, but they can do them at home now. I mean, the way technology has gone, a lot of people actually can continue working if they wanted to and do it from home.
Right, exactly.
But, you know,
those are good changes.
Yeah, and you were telling me a story, and I know this wouldn't necessarily have to deal with success, but it has to do with adapting to different things. So when you're used to something, and sometimes you have to kind of go backwards. And for baby boomers, it's a little easier because we've gone through all these changes, and sometimes when we've had to go back, it's not a big deal.
Exactly.
And you were telling me a story, Andrea, when years ago, when you were going up to your to visit your family and your daughter. So,
you know, I come from Sudbury, Ontario, so in northern, and even a little bit north of that. And and I moved to Toronto and got married when I was 19, 20 years old. And I always went home on the weekends, long weekends. And then Eddie started coming with me, and then my daughter was
Eddie's
about
her husband.
right. I think I've said that before, but
Yeah.
yeah, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So then my daughter was about, I want to say 4 or 5. We were going up there, and she was so excited in the car. We're going to see Grandma and Grandpa. And of course, Eddie, you know, the city boy, turns around and says, "What are you so excited about? What is so exciting about Sudbury?" And she said, "I love it up there. I love seeing Grandma and Grandpa." And he goes, "Well, now this goes to show you the difference between city and country.
Yeah.
My generation as to hers." He said, "Well, you know there's no air conditioning there." And she goes, "What? No air conditioning? How do they live without air conditioning?" And I go, "Stacy, you know that most of the world does not have air conditioning." And
But she didn't, and that's
yeah,
the thing, because
she
in her
didn't
world,
know. In her world, air conditioning was just normal. So that goes to show both of us grew up with no air conditioning.
no,
And as
you
a
opened
matter,
the window and
and
had a fan.
as a matter of fact, when I first came to Toronto, and I was 19, and I was looking for work, and I had never been in air conditioning as much as it was here, and I was going, and it was the hottest July ever, and of course I had to take a bus to all these interviews, so I was getting on an air-conditioned bus, getting off, walking to wherever I had to go in the heat, getting back on this bus. Well, I got sick, and I mean sick, bronchitis terribly. And so the last interview I went to, when the girl called me that she had this set up, I said, "Oh, I can't, I'm in bed, I'm sick." But she said, please, this is the perfect place for you, perfect job." I said, "Okay." So again, on the bus, air conditioning, and then I get to the job where I'm gonna have the interview. The driveway is half a mile long. I had to walk that whole line. When I got inside the office, air conditioning, sweating, the lady came out to get me, and honest, I coughed through the whole interview.
Wow.
Then I left the interview, got on the air-conditioned bus, walked, blah, 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 blah. The phone was ringing. When I got into the apartment, I got the job. She said, "If that girl could get herself here in that condition, I want her." And I stayed at that job till I had my second daughter.
So it's always interesting, though, you know, because what women will do actually to succeed.
Exactly.
You know, and we're so resilient for a lot of stuff, whether it's the changes that we have to go through, and you know, making sure that, because no matter what, and I was recently talking to a lady that is a career lady, but she said she never realized how much she was actually had on her plate, because she was working full time. She had a family, like children. She had a husband. But when she was home from work, she was still doing the bulk of absolutely everything. And she was very successful in her job, because as women, we will do what it takes
Exactly.
to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that means, you know, doing, I'll say even extra, because I know a lot of women, especially today with all the changes because of technology, they're at night at their computers finishing off stuff that they haven't been able to get done through the day.
And see, that's the thing that I say, the bad part of the change of the cell phones, the computers. There's never any peace and quiet at home, really. You sit down for dinner, the cell phones are going off. One child is looking at a text message, or somebody's on their computer sending off an email. And but in the old days, you'd come home, everything was shut off. You didn't have cell phones going off.
Nope.
You didn't have texts coming through. Everybody sat and ate. If the phone rang, you just let it ring, and you know,
Especially if it was through dinner.
it's through dinner.
Yeah.
Exactly. We all sat down as a family.
Yes.
In my home, we always did.
Yep, we
And
did too.
and now that just doesn't happen. There's everybody's in their own little spot, doing their own little thing. Like either it's on the computer or streaming or watching TikTok or answering a phone call, text messaging. You go into a restaurant, that's all you see. Families, all their heads are down like this. And it's funny, on Facebook, there's a joke that says, I now know why they call it a cell phone, because your cell phone puts you in jail.
You know what? And it's true. Other than I'll say, look at the odd thing, good news, I don't work on the weekend. So I'm not looking and tied to my phone. I'm not married to my phone. And if I'm with friends, I just leave it go. If I get a text, and I remember one time having a friend over and she said, well, aren't you going to check that? Because she heard my phone go off with the text. And I said, no. I said, because whoever's texting me, I'm not saying it's not important. It's not going to be work because I don't get those things on the weekend. And I'm with friends and I want to be present with my friends.
Right.
And so I don't need to know at that exact moment. And because even now I get spam texts, I get spam calls. Mm-hmm. Why would I disrupt my social time with my friends or my family to check my phone?
But
what is so important?
The new generation can't. They're so addicted to their cell phones. And my husband's one of them too, because he lives, his business through the cell phone and the computer. But even on weekends, whatever, if he hears a ding, oh boy, the hand goes out, the phone comes up. And all my children are the same. Me, I could care less, and he always gets mad if I, don't know. Why do you have a cell phone if you don't answer? Well, do I have to answer right away?
Exactly.
It's
in the old
we really
days,
become prisoners to these
right,
social
and
media.
We didn't have that in the old days.
No.
So
if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to find a phone booth somewhere if you were in your car.
Exactly. So
road trips were so wonderful back then.
Why do we need them then? Why do we need to be tied to it? And I don't think that that's going to help you to become more successful if you're actually a prisoner of your phone.
Yeah.
Do you know that there's I think it's France, but I'm not 100% sure which country, but they're not even allowed from work to text or call their employees when they're, I'll say, on their time off, which is whether it's in the evening or the weekend, they can't. Which means if you know that it's not life or death calling from work, then why do you have to be married to it? Why can't you, embrace technology, but for the good, to help you succeed, but not be the that's going to help hold you back?
Right.
Because you can only do so much, ladies. What we're here for is to help you push through and be successful in whatever that is. So with that, we have an exciting episode coming up. I'm not sure if it'll be next week or not, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you're going to want to tune in for sure. Mm-hmm. I'm Linda.
And I'm Andrea.
We want you to like,
share,
subscribe, ladies.
Please.
Yeah, we're not begging, but please do. Until next week.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.